The crisp autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves as Daniel Sinclair stood at his home office window, watching the gardener methodically rake the lawn. His reflection ghosted against the glass, revealing premature gray at his temples, a testament to the stress of the past 5 years. Daniel's eyes drifted to a framed photo on his desk. Clara, radiant in her hospital volunteer uniform, her arms around a younger Ethan. The image blurred as he blinked back tears. 5 years since the accident, and the pain still felt raw. A soft wheeze from the doorway made Daniel turn. 7-year-old Ethan stood there in dinosaur pajamas, clutching his inhaler. The boy's brown eyes, so like Clara's, were heavy with fatigue. "Hey, buddy," Daniel said, crossing the room in 3 quick strides. He knelt beside his son, noticing the slight bluish tinge around his lips. "Having trouble breathing again?" Ethan nodded, taking another puff from his inhaler. "I was trying to build a fort with my blankets, but—" He paused, catching his breath. "But it made me tired." Daniel scooped him up, feeling the rapid rise and fall of his small chest. These episodes were becoming more frequent, especially when Ethan tried to play like other kids his age. The weight of single parenthood pressed down on Daniel's shoulders as he carried his son to the master bedroom, where the medical-grade air purifier hummed steadily. As he tucked Ethan into the king-sized bed, Daniel noticed the boy's eyes drift to Clara's side of the bed, empty for 5 years, but still maintained out of habit or hope. Daniel wasn't sure which. "Tell me about Mommy again," Ethan whispered. It was their nightly ritual, this sharing of memories that kept Clara alive in their hearts. Daniel settled beside him, choosing his words carefully. "Your mom was the kind of person who could walk into a room and make everyone feel special. She had this laugh that would bubble up from nowhere, like music." He smiled, remembering. "And she loved you more than anything in this world. She used to sit right here, holding you through your breathing treatments, singing that silly song about the purple elephant." Ethan's breathing gradually steadied as he listened, his small hand clutching his father's larger one. "I remember the song," he murmured, "but I can't remember her voice anymore." The confession hit Daniel like a physical blow. He stroked his son's hair, fighting back tears. "I have videos," he said. "Tomorrow, we'll watch some together, okay?" But Ethan had already drifted off to sleep, his breathing now even and deep. Daniel remained there, watching the rise and fall of his chest, terrified of missing any sign of distress. The house felt too big, too empty, too quiet without Clara's presence. His phone buzzed with a message from his executive assistant. Another merger meeting rescheduled, another conference call delayed. As CEO of Sinclair Technologies, Daniel could delegate many things, but he couldn't delegate being a father. The past 5 years had been a precarious balance of running a Fortune 500 company while being the sole caregiver for a chronically ill child. Looking at Ethan's peaceful face, Daniel made a decision he'd been avoiding for months. He needed help, not just the rotating cast of night nurses and daytime caregivers, but someone permanent, someone who could be there when business demanded his attention, someone who could provide the consistent care Ethan needed. As he walked back to his office, Daniel's eyes fell on a framed newspaper clipping. Sinclair Technologies pioneers breakthrough in respiratory medicine. The headline had once filled him with pride, but now it left a bitter taste in his mouth. How could he be saving lives around the world when he couldn't even protect his own son from the ravages of chronic illness? Daniel sat heavily in his leather chair, surrounded by a stack of resumes that his HR department had pre-screened for the nanny position. Each candidate boasted impressive credentials: degrees in childhood education, certifications in pediatric care, glowing references from prestigious families. Yet something felt off about every single one of them. As he began to sift through the applications, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something crucial, something that Clara would have seen immediately. "Mr. Sinclair." His assistant Margaret's voice crackled through the intercom, interrupting Daniel's thoughts. "Dr. Reynolds is on line 1 regarding Ethan's latest test results." Daniel's stomach tightened as he picked up the phone. After last week's severe breathing episode that had landed them in the ER at 3 a.m., they'd run a new battery of tests. He'd been holding his breath ever since, trying not to imagine worst-case scenarios. "Daniel," Dr. Reynolds began, his voice carrying the weight of 20 years of medical practice. "Ethan's condition is showing signs of progression. The inflammation in his airways has increased since our last assessment." The words hit him like a physical blow. Daniel gripped the edge of his desk, his knuckles turning white. "What are our options?" Dr. Reynolds sighed, a sound that sent a chill down Daniel's spine. "We can adjust his medication protocol, but what Ethan really needs is more consistent monitoring. These nocturnal episodes are particularly concerning." The doctor paused. "Have you considered bringing in full-time help?" Daniel's eyes drifted to the resumes on his desk. "I'm in the process of hiring someone." "Good. The right caregiver could make a significant difference in managing his condition. I'm sending over some new literature on experimental treatments. It's cutting-edge stuff, Daniel. Some of it from your own company's research division." After ending the call, Daniel loosened his tie and walked to the wall of windows overlooking the city. Sinclair Technologies' headquarters dominated the skyline, a testament to his professional success. Yet here he was, feeling utterly helpless when it came to protecting his own son. The memory of last week's ER visit haunted him. He'd woken to Ethan's monitor alarm, found his son struggling to breathe, his lips turning blue. The 10-minute drive to the hospital had felt like an eternity. The night nurse had called in sick that evening, and Daniel had thought they could manage one night without coverage. Never again. He returned to his desk and pressed the intercom button. "Margaret, cancel my meetings for the afternoon, and contact the top 5 candidates on our list. I want to conduct the interviews personally." "Right away, Mr. Sinclair. Also, there's someone here without an appointment, a Sarah Thompson. She says she's inquiring about the nanny position." Daniel frowned. His HR department had strict protocols for screening candidates. "She's not on our list." "No, sir. She says she heard about the position from one of the nurses at Children's Memorial." The mention of Children's Memorial, Clara's old volunteer site, gave him pause. A memory surfaced. Clara, animated and flushed with excitement, telling him about a new friend she'd made at the hospital. What was the name she'd mentioned? Sarah. It couldn't be the same person, could it? "Send her in," Daniel said, curiosity getting the better of him. The woman who entered his office wasn't what he expected. Where the other candidates had arrived in power suits with polished portfolios, Sarah Thompson wore a simple blue dress and carried a worn leather messenger bag. She appeared to be in her early 30s, with kind eyes and an air of quiet confidence that immediately put Daniel at ease. "Mr. Sinclair," she said, extending her hand. "Thank you for seeing me without an appointment. I know it's unorthodox." Her handshake was firm, her smile genuine. "Please, sit." He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "You worked at Children's Memorial?" "For 8 years in the pediatric respiratory unit. I specialized in caring for children with chronic conditions." She pulled out a thin folder from her bag. "I know your HR department has a formal process, but when I heard about Ethan's situation, I felt compelled to apply directly." Something in her voice caught his attention. "You heard about Ethan specifically?" Sarah nodded, her expression softening. "The nursing staff still talks about Clara. She made such an impact during her volunteer work." She paused, her eyes meeting Daniel's. "I remember seeing her with the children. She had a gift for making them feel safe, even during the scariest procedures." Daniel's throat tightened. It was the first time someone had spoken about Clara so naturally, without the awkward sympathy that usually accompanied her mention. "Did you know her well?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Sarah's eyes flickered with an emotion Daniel couldn't quite place. "We worked together often. Clara was special. She saw things others missed." She leaned forward, her voice taking on a note of urgency. "Mr. Sinclair, I'm not here just because I need a job. I'm here because I believe I can help Ethan. I've worked with children like him for years. I understand not just the medical aspects, but the emotional challenges they face." As she spoke about her experience, her approach to care, and her understanding of respiratory conditions, Daniel felt something he hadn't expected: hope. But with it came fear. The last time he'd trusted someone completely with his family's care, He'd lost Clara. The security camera feeds on his monitor caught his eye, reminding him that things could be different this time. He could take precautions, maintain control while still getting Ethan the help he needed. "When can you start?" he heard himself asking, surprising them both. Sarah's face lit up. "I can begin tomorrow, if you'd like to have a trial period." As they discussed terms and logistics, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that this meeting wasn't just coincidence. Whether that was a good thing or not, only time would tell. Later that night, after Ethan was asleep, Daniel found himself rewatching old home videos. On the screen, Clara laughed as she chased a toddling Ethan through a field of sunflowers. Her voice, clear and vibrant, sang out, "Come on, little elephant, let's go on an adventure." Daniel's finger hovered over the pause button, struck by a sudden realization. The Purple Elephant song. It had been Clara's creation. How had Sarah known about it? As the video played on, Daniel's mind raced with questions. Who was Sarah Thompson really? And why did he have the unsettling feeling that hiring her was both the best and most dangerous decision he'd ever made? The morning sun filtered through the stained glass windows of the Sinclair Mansion's foyer, casting kaleidoscope patterns across the marble floor. Daniel watched as Mrs. Chen, their housekeeper of 10 years, gave Sarah a detailed tour of the first floor. He'd arrived early from his morning meetings to oversee Sarah's first day, unable to focus on work until he saw how Ethan would respond to her presence. "The kitchen is fully stocked according to Ethan's dietary restrictions," Mrs. Chen explained, opening custom cabinets. "All potential allergens are stored separately in the butler's pantry." Sarah took careful notes in a small notebook, asking detailed questions about Ethan's meal schedule and preferences. Her attention to detail impressed Daniel, but anxiety still churned in his stomach. He checked his watch. Ethan would be waking up soon. As if on cue, the baby monitor he always carried crackled with sounds from upstairs. "Daddy?" Ethan's voice was scratchy, a common morning symptom of his condition. "I should go up," Daniel said, moving toward the stairs. "Mr. Sinclair," Sarah spoke softly, "would you consider letting me accompany you? It might be less overwhelming for Ethan to meet me while you're there, rather than having me appear later." Her suggestion made sense, though it went against his protective instincts. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. They found Ethan sitting up in bed, his brown hair tousled from sleep, already using his morning nebulizer treatment. His eyes widened at the sight of Sarah, but he didn't show the usual anxiety he exhibited around strangers. "Good morning, buddy," Daniel said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "This is Sarah. Remember we talked about having someone special come to help take care of you?" Ethan nodded, not removing his nebulizer mask. Sarah approached slowly, pulling something from her bag, a small, plush elephant in an improbable shade of purple. "Hi, Ethan," she said warmly. "I heard you might like this little guy. He's a special kind of elephant that helps guard children's dreams." She placed the stuffed animal on the bed, giving Ethan space to decide whether to take it. Daniel watched in amazement as Ethan reached for the elephant with his free hand, examining it with interest. When the nebulizer treatment finished, he removed his mask and asked, "Does he have a name?" "Not yet," Sarah replied. "He's been waiting for someone special to name him. Can I call him Trumpet?" Ethan hugged the elephant close. "That's perfect," Sarah smiled. "You know, Trumpet is very good at helping with morning routines. Would you like to show him how you get ready for the day?" To Daniel's surprise, Ethan eagerly agreed. He watched as Sarah naturally integrated herself into their morning routine, somehow making each step feel like an adventure rather than a medical necessity. She knew exactly how to position the air purifier, remembered all the medication timings, and even made Ethan laugh during his chest physiotherapy exercises, something that usually caused tears of frustration. "Daddy," Ethan called as Daniel prepared to leave for work. "Is Sarah staying?" The hope in his son's voice made Daniel's decision easier. "Yes, buddy. She'll be here when you need her." As he headed out, Daniel couldn't shake a mix of relief and unease. Sarah seemed perfect, almost too perfect. And there was something in the way she had looked at Clara's photos in the hallway, an expression he couldn't quite decipher. Later that afternoon, during a brief break between meetings, Daniel checked the security footage on his phone. He watched as Sarah and Ethan worked on his homeschool lessons, her patience evident as she helped him through a breathing exercise when he became winded from reading aloud. She seemed to anticipate his needs before he voiced them, maintaining a perfect balance of attention and independence. Yet something nagged at him. During lunch, he'd noticed Sarah pausing near the family photos in the hallway, her expression unreadable as she studied Clara's face. It was probably nothing, natural curiosity about the family she was working for. But years of business dealings had taught Daniel to trust his instincts. He opened his laptop and began typing an email to his private investigator. A thorough background check had already been completed through HR, but Daniel wanted something deeper. Sarah Thompson seemed perfect, almost too perfect, and perfection often hid the deepest flaws. As he typed, his eyes strayed to the last family photo taken before Clara's accident. They were all smiling, unaware of how their world would soon shatter. He couldn't risk anything happening to Ethan. This time, he would make sure he knew exactly who he was trusting with his most precious responsibility. The question was, would his protective measures reveal something he wasn't prepared to discover? The soft blue glow of multiple monitors illuminated Daniel's face as he sat in his newly constructed surveillance room, hidden behind a false wall in his home office. The security company had finished the installation yesterday, creating a comprehensive system that covered every corner of the mansion except the bathrooms and bedrooms, areas where he'd drawn an ethical line. The cameras are state-of-the-art, the technician had explained, pointing to various screens. Motion-activated, night vision capable, and equipped with audio. Everything backs up to secure cloud storage automatically. Now, a week into Sarah's employment, Daniel found himself spending more time watching these screens than he cared to admit. He told himself it was natural concern, not paranoia, that drove him to observe their daily routines with such intensity. On the central monitor, Sarah moved through the kitchen with practiced efficiency, preparing Ethan's lunch while simultaneously monitoring his vital signs on the medical tablet she carried. She'd introduced several small but significant changes to their routine, each one showing remarkable insight into Ethan's condition. "Look, Trumpet." Ethan's voice came through the speakers clearly, as he held up his purple elephant to see the sandwich Sarah had made. "She made it look like a race car." Daniel leaned closer to the screen, watching his son's face light up. A sight that had become increasingly common over the past week. The oxygen saturation monitor on Ethan's finger beeped steadily, its readings stronger than they'd been in months. A notification popped up on his phone, the preliminary report from his private investigator. Daniel opened it eagerly, scanning the contents. Sarah Thompson, 34, graduated top of her class from Johns Hopkins School of Nursing, 8 years at Children's Memorial, specialized training in pediatric respiratory care, impeccable references. Everything checked out perfectly. Too perfectly. He switched to another camera feed, watching Sarah help Ethan with his breathing exercises in the living room. She was singing that same song about the purple elephant, the one Clara used to sing. How did she know that song? The intercom buzzed, startling him. "Mr. Sinclair," Margaret's voice came through. "The board members are waiting in the conference room." Daniel reluctantly stood, straightening his tie. "Tell them I'll be there in 10 minutes. He took one last look at the monitors, watching as Sarah expertly handled another of Ethan's coughing fits. During the board meeting, his mind kept drifting back to the mansion. He found himself checking the surveillance app on his phone between presentations, unable to shake the feeling that he was missing something important. That evening, after Ethan was asleep, Daniel reviewed the day's footage. He noticed something odd. Sarah occasionally paused in front of certain photographs, particularly ones featuring Clara. Sometimes she would reach out as if to touch them, then pull back at the last moment. In one clip, she stood before Clara's favorite painting in the library, whispering something the cameras couldn't quite pick up. A knock at his office door made him quickly switch screens. "Come in." Sarah entered, holding her daily report notebook. "Mr. Sinclair, I wanted to discuss some observations about Ethan's progress." She sat down, not seeming to notice his slightly flustered state. "His breathing has improved significantly. But I noticed something interesting about his episodes. They often correlate with emotional triggers, particularly when he's talking about his mother. Daniel stiffened. What do you mean? It's common in children with chronic conditions, Sarah explained, her voice gentle but professional. Physical symptoms can be exacerbated by emotional stress. I think it might help if we found more ways to help him process his grief. Behind his desk, Daniel's hand hovered over the mouse, one click away from the surveillance feeds that showed Sarah's own strange behavior around Clara's memories. And you have experience with this? Something flickered across Sarah's face. Was it pain? Understanding? Yes, she said simply. More than you might think. Before he could probe further, the medical alert system chimed. Ethan's oxygen levels were dropping. They both rushed to his room, professional concerns temporarily overshadowing personal mysteries. Later that night, reviewing the footage again, Daniel noticed something he'd missed before. In the library scene, he adjusted the audio, straining to hear Sarah's whispered words to Clara's portrait. I'm sorry it took me so long to get here. Daniel froze the frame, studying Sarah's face in the grainy footage. What exactly was she sorry for? And who was Sarah Thompson really? He opened his laptop, determined to dig deeper into her past. There had to be something, some connection he was missing. As he typed, he couldn't shake the feeling that the cameras he'd installed to maintain control were about to reveal secrets that would change everything. In Ethan's room, unaware of his father's scrutiny, the boy slept peacefully. Trumpet the purple elephant clutched tightly to his chest. On his bedside table, a framed photo of Clara watched over him, her smile frozen in time, holding secrets of her own. Daddy, why do you watch Sarah on your computers? Daniel nearly choked on his coffee. It was Saturday morning, and Ethan had wandered into his office unexpectedly. He quickly minimized the surveillance screens, but the question hung in the air like a heavy cloud. What do you mean, buddy? Daniel asked, trying to keep his voice casual. Ethan climbed onto his lap, his breathing steady, a marked improvement from 3 months ago. I saw the pictures on your computer yesterday, like the ones at the store where Mommy used to take me. Security cameras. He was comparing them to the store's surveillance system. Daniel sometimes forgot how observant his son could be. I'm just making sure everyone's safe, Daniel explained carefully, his mind racing to find the right words. Ethan fiddled with Trumpet's ears, a habit he'd developed when thinking deeply. Sarah makes me feel safe, he said simply, like Mommy did. The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. What makes you say that? She knows things, Ethan continued, his voice taking on that peculiar wisdom children sometimes possess. She knows about the special way Mommy used to rub my chest when it hurt, and about the secret knock we had. He demonstrated the pattern on Daniel's desk. 3 quick taps, 2 slow ones. Daniel felt the blood drain from his face. He'd never taught Sarah that knock. It had been Clara's special signal to Ethan that everything was okay during medical procedures. And sometimes, Ethan added, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret, when she thinks I'm sleeping, she talks to Mommy's picture and says she's sorry she couldn't save her. The room seemed to tilt slightly. What else does she say, Ethan? She says she should have been braver. Ethan looked up at his father with Clara's eyes. Daddy, why does Sarah need to be brave? Before Daniel could respond, Sarah appeared in the doorway, her face pale. She must have heard their conversation. Ethan, she said softly, it's time for your morning treatment. Daniel watched them leave, his son trustingly taking Sarah's hand. Through the surveillance feed on his computer, he observed their routine, noting how Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she set up the nebulizer. As Ethan breathed in the medicated mist, Sarah sat beside him, her voice low and soothing. You know, Ethan, sometimes grown-ups need to be brave too, especially when they care about someone very much. Like how Daddy is brave for me? Ethan asked, his words slightly muffled by the mask. Sarah nodded, her eyes glistening. Exactly. And your mommy was very brave too. Daniel leaned closer to the screen, straining to hear every word. Did you know my mommy? Ethan asked. Sarah paused, her hand resting gently on Ethan's back. "I did. She was an amazing person, and she loved you very, very much." As Daniel watched this interaction, a mix of emotions swirled within him: suspicion, curiosity, and an unexpected pang of something that felt dangerously like hope. The autumn rain pelted against the surveillance room's hidden window as Daniel pored over weeks of archived footage. 3 months had passed since Sarah's arrival, and while Ethan's health had improved remarkably, Daniel's suspicions had only grown stronger. He clicked through various clips he'd flagged as suspicious. Sarah making a phone call at Dois AM in the garden, her voice too low for the cameras to catch. Her reaction to finding Clara's old journal in the library, the way she sometimes stared at the family photos with what looked like guilt rather than curiosity. His private investigator's latest report lay open on his desk. "Found something interesting," it read. Sarah Thompson's employment record at Children's Memorial has a 6-month gap, coinciding with the time of Clara's accident. Hospital records show she took an unexpected leave of absence. Daniel rubbed his temples, fighting a headache. On one screen, he watched current footage of Sarah reading to Ethan in the living room. His son was curled up against her side, Trumpet the purple elephant clutched in his arms, looking more peaceful than he had in years. And then the brave knight realized, Sarah's voice came through the speakers, that sometimes the biggest battles aren't fought with swords, but with truth and courage. Ethan looked up at her. "Like Mommy? Daddy says she was brave." Sarah's hand trembled slightly as she turned the page. "Yes, your mommy was very brave. She always fought for what she believed in." The certainty in her voice made Daniel sit up straighter. How did she know that about Clara? His phone buzzed. Another message from his investigator. Found old social media posts. Sarah Thompson and Clara attended the same nursing school for 1 semester before Clara switched to business school. They were roommates. Daniel's heart pounded as pieces started falling into place. He pulled up the hospital's volunteer records from 5 years ago. Clara's shifts in the pediatric ward overlapped with Sarah's work schedule multiple times. They hadn't just known each other, they had reconnected. But why hadn't Sarah mentioned this? On the screen, Ethan's breathing monitor beeped, showing elevated numbers. Sarah immediately shifted into action, her movements practiced and precise. "Let's do our special breathing exercise," she suggested, demonstrating the technique Clara had always used. Daniel zoomed in on her face as she comforted his son. There was something in her expression, a mix of devotion and remorse that seemed too personal, too deep for a mere caregiver. He opened Clara's old emails, something he hadn't done in years. The password still worked. He searched for Sarah's name and found nothing. But when he searched for Sarah T., dozens of messages appeared, all sent to an encrypted email address. The last email was dated 3 days before the accident. We need to talk. What we discovered can't stay hidden. I'm doing what's right, no matter what the consequences. Meet me at our usual spot on Friday. C. Daniel's hands shook as he read the message. On another monitor, he watched Sarah tuck Ethan into bed, singing Clara's Purple Elephant song, a song he now realized she must have learned from Clara herself. The final piece clicked when he noticed Sarah slipping something from her pocket, a worn photograph. The security camera zoomed in automatically, a younger Sarah and Clara, arms around each other, wearing nursing school uniforms. On the back, barely visible, was a handwritten note. Partners in crime, partners in justice. What had they discovered? What truth had Clara been ready to reveal? As if sensing his scrutiny, Sarah looked directly at the hidden camera in Ethan's room. Her expression was clear. She knew she'd been watched, and she'd been waiting for this moment. Daniel stood up, his heart racing. He needed answers, and he needed them now. But as he reached for the door, he hesitated. What would these revelations mean for Ethan? For the fragile peace they'd built over the past 3 months? He glanced back at the screen, where Sarah was now sitting in the hallway outside Ethan's room, her head in her hands. For the first time, Daniel saw her not as a potential threat, but as someone carrying a burden as heavy as his own. The question was no longer who Sarah Thompson was, but what she knew about Clara's death, and why she had really come into their lives. With a deep breath, Daniel stepped out of the surveillance room, ready to confront the truth, whatever it might be. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed midnight as Daniel made his way to the living room, his heart pounding in his chest. Sarah was already there, sitting in Clara's favorite armchair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I suppose I should start by saying I'm sorry," Sarah began as Daniel took a seat across from her. "Sorry for not being honest from the beginning, and sorry for everything else." "Who are you really, Sarah?" Daniel's voice was low, controlled, but trembling with barely suppressed emotion. "Why are you here?" Sarah took a deep breath. "I'm exactly who I said I am, a nurse who specializes in pediatric respiratory care. But I'm also the person who was with Clara the night she died." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Daniel gripped the arms of his chair, knuckles turning white. "You were... what?" "Clara and I reconnected when she started volunteering at the hospital," Sarah explained, her voice breaking slightly. "We had been close in nursing school before she changed majors. When we met again, it was like no time had passed." Daniel's mind raced, trying to reconcile this new information with his memories. "She never mentioned you." "She was protecting me," Sarah said softly. "Protecting both of us, and what we'd discovered." "And what exactly was that?" Daniel leaned forward, his tone sharp. Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out a worn leather journal. Clara's journal. "It's all in here." Clara was investigating discrepancies in the hospital's research department. Falsified data, suppressed negative results, all pointing to a new respiratory drug that was being fast-tracked for approval. "What does this have to do with her accident?" Daniel asked, though a part of him already knew the answer. "It wasn't an accident," Sarah whispered, tears forming in her eyes. "We were on our way to meet with a journalist that night. Clara had all the evidence. But someone ran us off the road. I was thrown clear, but Clara..." Her voice trailed off. Daniel felt as if the room was spinning. "Why didn't you come forward? Why wait 5 years?" "I was afraid," Sarah admitted. "After the accident, I was approached by someone, I never saw their face, who made it clear that if I spoke up, Ethan would be in danger. So I disappeared, changed my name slightly. But I never stopped watching over your family from afar. And now..." Daniel's voice was hoarse. "The drug Clara was investigating. It's about to be approved for pediatric use. I couldn't stay silent anymore. Not when children like Ethan might be at risk." Sarah leaned forward, her eyes pleading. "I came here to protect Ethan. Yes, but also to finish what Clara started." Daniel stood abruptly, pacing the room. His world had been shattered once when Clara died. Now it was crumbling again with every revelation. "I need proof," he said finally. "I need to see everything." Sarah nodded, opening Clara's journal. "It's all here. Plus, I've been gathering additional evidence over the years. We can expose them, Daniel. We can make sure Clara didn't die in vain." As they pored over documents and pieced together Clara's investigation, the night deepened. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing away the last vestiges of the life Daniel thought he knew. By dawn, a new understanding had formed between them, a shared mission born from love, loss, and a desperate need for justice. But as the first light crept through the windows, Daniel realized this was only the beginning. The real storm, the confrontation with those who had taken Clara from them, was yet to come. The following weeks passed in a blur of clandestine meetings, late-night research, and mounting tension. Daniel and Sarah worked tirelessly, piecing together Clara's investigation while maintaining a facade of normalcy for Ethan's sake. One crisp autumn evening, as golden leaves swirled past the mansion's windows, Daniel's private investigator arrived with a thick folder tucked under his arm. His face was grim as he spread the contents across Daniel's desk. "You were right to dig deeper," the investigator said. "The drug company Clara was investigating, Pharmatech, has ties to some very powerful people, including..." He slid a photo across the desk. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. Staring back at him was his own father, Robert Sinclair, shaking hands with Pharmatech's CEO. "No," Daniel whispered, "this can't be right." But as he and Sarah delved into the documents, the horrifying truth emerged. Sinclair Technologies, under his father's leadership, had been a silent partner in Pharmatech's research, funneling money through a maze of shell companies. "Daniel," Sarah said softly, "there's more." She pointed to a series of emails. "These suggest your father knew about the falsified data. He might have been involved in the decision to silence Clara." The room spun around Daniel. He gripped the edge of the desk, memories flooding back. His father's insistence on handling all the funeral arrangements, the pressure to move on quickly, the subtle discouragement from looking too closely at the accident report. "I need to confront him," Daniel said, his voice shaking. "We need to be careful," Sarah warned. "If he's involved, he's dangerous. We should go to the authorities first." But Daniel was already dialing his father's number, years of suppressed anger and grief boiling to the surface. "Dad," he said when Robert answered, "we need to talk. About Clara, about Pharmatech, about everything." There was a long pause on the other end. Then, "I'll be there in an hour. Alone." As they waited, Daniel and Sarah prepared, gathering all their evidence. They decided to confront Robert in Daniel's study, with the security cameras recording everything. Robert Sinclair arrived precisely on time, his face an inscrutable mask as he entered the study. But as Daniel laid out their findings, the older man's composure cracked. "You don't understand," Robert said, his voice strained. "The drug could have saved millions. We couldn't let one study derail everything." "So you let them kill my wife." Daniel's words were ice cold. Robert flinched. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that. We just wanted to delay her, keep her from going public until we could control the narrative. But the men they sent, they went too far." Sarah, who had been silently watching, spoke up. "You knew I survived. You're the one who threatened Ethan to keep me quiet." Robert's shoulders sagged. "I was protecting our family, our legacy. Daniel, everything I've done has been for you and Ethan." "No," Daniel cut him off. "You don't get to justify this. Clara is dead. Ethan grew up without a mother, and God knows how many people might have been harmed by this drug." As if on cue, Ethan's voice called from the hallway. "Daddy? Is that Grandpa?" The three adults froze. Daniel moved to intercept his son, but Ethan was already in the doorway, trumpet clutched to his chest. "Ethan," Robert began, his voice gentle. "I'm sorry, but Grandpa has to go now." But Ethan's gaze was fixed on the photos spread across the desk, particularly one of Clara and Sarah together. "That's Mommy," he said. "And Sarah. They're smiling." In that moment, looking at his son, Clara's son, Daniel knew what he had to do. He knelt beside Ethan. "Buddy, there's something very important we need to tell you. About Mommy, and about why Sarah is here." Robert stepped forward. "Daniel, think about what you're doing." "No, Dad, no more secrets, no more lies." Daniel turned to Sarah. "We'll tell him together. And then we're going to make this right." As they began to explain, gently and carefully, to a wide-eyed Ethan, Daniel felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. The truth was painful, yes, but it was also freeing. They had a long road ahead, legal battles, public revelations, family reckonings, but for the first time in years, he felt like he was honoring Clara's memory. Outside, the autumn wind picked up, carrying the last of the season's leaves into the darkening sky. Inside the Sinclair mansion, a family began the difficult but necessary process of healing, united by the truth that had finally come to light. The weeks following the confrontation with Robert were a whirlwind of activity. Daniel, with Sarah's support, took their evidence to the authorities. The ensuing investigation sent shockwaves through the pharmaceutical industry and the Sinclair family alike. Robert Sinclair was arrested, along with several executives from Pharmatech. The media frenzy was intense, with reporters camped outside the mansion gates day and night. Through it all, Daniel focused on what mattered most: Ethan. One evening, as they sat in the garden away from the chaos, Ethan asked, "Daddy, is Grandpa a bad person?" Daniel sighed, choosing his words carefully. "People can do bad things without being all bad, buddy. Grandpa made some very serious mistakes, but he thought he was protecting us. That doesn't make it right, But it's complicated. Ethan nodded, his young face serious. Like in my stories, sometimes the bad guys think they're the good guys. That's right, Daniel said, marveling at his son's insight. The important thing is that we always try to do what's right, even when it's hard. As the legal proceedings unfolded, Daniel made the difficult decision to step down as CEO of Sinclair Technologies. He appointed a trusted board member as interim leader and focused on restructuring the company, ensuring all ties to Pharmatech were severed and implementing stringent ethical guidelines. Sarah remained a constant presence, not just as Ethan's caregiver, but as a pillar of support for the entire family. Her testimony was crucial in the case against Pharmatech, and her unwavering dedication to Clara's mission gave purpose to their shared grief. One crisp morning, as golden sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, Daniel found Sarah and Ethan huddled over Clara's old journal. "And this," Sarah was saying, pointing to a pressed flower between the pages, "is from the day your mom and I decided to investigate Pharmatech. We picked it for good luck." Ethan traced the delicate petals with his finger. "Do you think Mommy would be happy now?" Sarah met Daniel's eyes over Ethan's head. "I think she'd be very proud of how brave you and your dad have been." As the case progressed, Daniel and Sarah grew closer, united by their shared mission and the love they both held for Ethan and Clara's memory. Their relationship evolved slowly, built on a foundation of trust and shared experiences. Months passed. The Pharmatech trial concluded with convictions for those responsible for Clara's death and the cover-up. The drug in question was pulled from consideration, and new, stricter protocols were implemented industry-wide. On the anniversary of Clara's death, Daniel, Sarah, and Ethan stood together at her grave. Ethan placed Trumpet the purple elephant against the headstone. "I think Mommy might need him more than me now," he said softly. Daniel knelt beside his son, tears in his eyes. "That's very kind of you, buddy. I think Mom would love that." Sarah placed a hand on both their shoulders. "Clara's watching over us," she said. "Her love is still here, in everything we do to honor her memory." As they walked back to the car, Ethan between them holding both their hands, Daniel realized that their family had been reshaped by truth and justice. The pain of loss would never fully disappear, but it had been tempered by the bonds they'd formed and the good they'd done in Clara's name. That evening, as Ethan slept peacefully for the first time in years without needing his breathing treatments, Daniel and Sarah sat on the porch swing, watching the stars come out. "What happens now?" Sarah asked, her head resting on Daniel's shoulder. Daniel took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "We keep moving forward. We make sure Ethan grows up knowing his mother's courage, and we continue Clara's work, making the world a little bit better, one day at a time." Sarah smiled, squeezing his hand. "Together?" "Together," Daniel affirmed, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. Inside, Ethan's monitor beeped steadily, a reminder of how far they'd come and the challenges they'd overcome. The Sinclair mansion, once a place of secrets and sorrow, now stood as a testament to the power of truth, love, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Both those we're born into, and those we choose. The warm summer breeze rustled through the leaves of the old maple tree in the Sinclair's backyard. Beneath its sprawling branches, a lively birthday party was in full swing. Ethan, now 12, was surrounded by friends, his laughter ringing out clear and strong, a sound that never failed to make Daniel's heart swell with joy and gratitude. Sarah appeared at Daniel's side, balancing their 3-year-old daughter, Lily, on her hip. Named after Clara's favorite flower, Lily had her mother's spirit and her father's determination. "Can you believe it?" Sarah said, watching Ethan demonstrate a science experiment to his captivated audience. "5 years ago, we weren't sure he'd ever have a day like this." Daniel wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling his family close. Clara would be so proud of him, of all of us. The past 5 years had brought immense change. Daniel had transformed Sinclair Technologies into a leader in ethical pharmaceutical research, with a special focus on pediatric respiratory care. The Clara Sinclair Foundation, co-founded by Daniel and Sarah, had become a powerful force for accountability in the healthcare industry. Robert Sinclair, after serving time for his role in the cover-up, had been released on parole. His relationship with Daniel remained strained, but he was making efforts to rebuild trust, especially with Ethan. It was a slow, often painful process, but one that held the promise of eventual healing. Sarah had written a book about Clara's investigation and its aftermath, shedding light on corporate corruption and the importance of whistleblowers. It had become a bestseller, sparking important conversations about ethics in medicine. As the party wound down, the family gathered for their nightly ritual. They sat in a circle on the lawn, with Trumpet the purple elephant in the center, a little worn now, but still cherished. "Okay, Lily," Ethan said gently to his sister. "It's your turn to start. Tell us one thing you're grateful for today." Lily's face scrunched up in concentration. "I'm grateful for ice cream," she declared, causing everyone to laugh. They continued around the circle, each sharing a moment of gratitude. When it came to Daniel, he looked at the faces of his loved ones, feeling a profound sense of peace. "I'm grateful for second chances," he said, "for the truth that set us free, and for the love that helped us heal." Sarah wiped a tear from her eye. "And I'm grateful for Clara," she added, "for her courage, her love, and the way she brought us all together, even after she was gone." As twilight deepened, they made their way back to the house. Ethan carried a sleepy Lily, while Daniel and Sarah walked arm in arm behind them. The security cameras that once monitored every move now stood silent, no longer needed in a home filled with trust and openness. Inside, on the mantel, sat a framed photo of Clara, her smile radiant and timeless. Next to it was a family portrait taken just last month: Daniel, Sarah, Ethan, and Lily, their faces reflecting the joy and love that had blossomed from sorrow. As they prepared for bed, Daniel caught sight of his reflection in the mirror. The lines of worry that had once etched his face had softened, replaced by laugh lines and a quiet contentment. In Ethan's room, now adorned with science fair ribbons and a wall-sized periodic table, Daniel tucked his son in. "Dad," Ethan said sleepily, "do you think Mom can see us now?" Daniel smiled, his heart full. "I think she's been with us all along, buddy. In every brave choice we make, in every moment of kindness. She's here in the family we've become." As he turned out the light, Daniel felt Clara's presence more strongly than ever. Not as a ghost or a painful memory, but as a guiding light that had led them through the darkness to find healing, purpose, and a love deeper than they could have imagined. The Sinclair mansion stood peaceful in the moonlight, no longer haunted by the past, but embracing a future bright with possibility. Within its walls, a family slept soundly, their dreams filled with hope and the endless potential of tomorrow. What did you think of the story? Leave a comment with your opinion. 2 buttons will appear next to it, one to subscribe, if you haven't already, and another to watch other exciting stories. Make your choice. Thanks for watching this far. See you soon.